another casual conversation with the classic. And I am here today with none other than host, interviewer, broadcaster, podcaster, athlete, dog mom, pet enthusiast, and a good friend of mine, Caroline Szwed. What's going on? How are you today?
First of all,
sweater.
Shout out to you because this is the best sweater I've ever owned in my entire life. And if I could wear it
really nice.
If I could wear it every single day, I would. I do wear it very often, so I was like, I have to wear it today. It's perfect timing. But thank you for having me on. I'm so excited. This is long overdue, as we've said so many times. And I'm just excited to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being on. I'm really glad we finally get to do this. Like you said, it is long overdue. I've asked you many times in the past because when I started this show, I was trying to get everyone cool that I know to come on and kind of share their stories and let people know, even outside of the wrestling bubble, like who these people are and what they do. And man, like the journey I've had with this show alone has been insane. But I'm glad to actually have you on here. It's about damn time. There's lots of things I want to talk to you about. Lots of things. Right. But first, there's two things I want to start off with. First things first. I just saw on your Instagram as I was like getting ready and preparing for this that you got this donair pizza. And I'm just curious. Like I know from the research I've done, we're both big pizza lovers. And I know this is such a random question, but like, what's the best pizza you've ever had?
Oh my God. Well, you know what? This place in Edmonton, UFO Pizza.
Yeah.
I've never had a donair prior to coming to Edmonton. And my fiance, Mike, he's like right on the stairs. I'm looking at him because we're just talking about it. I was like, he goes, where does this rank on like the best pizza you ever had? I'm like, this is up there because I love a classic cheese. Okay. I'm not fancy, but this pizza is delicious. I think I had 5 slices. Mike smashed 8. and like, I'm still thinking about it. Like, I'm like, okay, so like if I eat it today, when's the next day we can eat it and not be too soon? It's so good. So basically like a donair on a pizza and then this like white, what is it? There's sweet sauce. It's white and it's like all over it and it's so good. And usually I'm like a dipping sauce kind of girl, but with that, you don't need any. Oh, it was like we had such a nice day today. We got some exciting news, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, let's celebrate. And the only thing I could think of was 1 pizza, 2 donair pizza. Yeah. And it's so funny because I put it out on my Twitter and the whole Edmonton community, which I love because people in Edmonton are so nice and so sweet and just so receptive. They're like blowing it up, being like, it's the best pizza. And I'm like, I'm so glad to be here.
No, it looked delicious. And I was like, yo, I'm definitely going to bring that up because as a pizza lover, I'm like, oh, that looked really good. And I'm one of those people too. Like I went and ventured out to like, you know, fancier pizzas. Like I went to like the meat lovers and the house specials and the Greek pizza and the cheeseburger pizza. And then everyone's like, yo, you went so backwards. You went so basic again. Now you're just like, I want a pepperoni pizza. Like that's it. Just cheese and pepperoni. But I saw that and it looked so good.
My motto is like less is more with everything. Like I'm just like a plain Jane classic kind of girl. But that was like the home run of pizzas. It was so good. And yeah, like I'm in trouble here in Edmonton for, you know, as long as that donair pizza's around, that's my cheat day meal.
now you know what you can reward yourself with.
Literally, honestly.
You know what? If I get this done, I'm going to grab that pizza and that's that.
And hopefully we get sponsored by Donair Pizza now.
Yeah, there you go. We just gave them a shout out, I guess. Yeah, shout out to Donair Pizza. Move over to Vancouver. Come to the West Coast.
Literally.
But I want to start off with this first because I'm a big podcast listener and I know first things first, like everyone listens to the beginning. I don't know if everyone makes it to the end and I don't know how this conversation is going to go. So let's talk about your new podcast that's coming out. Let's talk about Szwed Talk.
Thank you for asking. So yeah, you know, you know of my professional background. I've been in the TV broadcast world for 5 years and I was in a really bad car accident towards the end of 2019 and it kind of changed my entire life. And I felt like every single day I need to be doing something that I want to be doing on a soul level, right? That's super fulfilling. And every single day that I wasn't living authentically, it wouldn't sit well with me anymore. So I finally made the decision, 3 or 4 weeks ago now to leave my job at Sportsnet. And I'm creating a podcast and also a lot of what we're going to be doing is going to be going on YouTube. My episode's going to launch. So the first episode's going to launch on April 5th. But the vision behind it and the vision that I've had for a very long time now is to create a space where I can share people's stories. And, you know, this was inspired by my parents who years ago in 1984, illegally escaped communist Poland, came to Canada, created this beautiful life for their family. And when you look at them now, they've done so well for themselves, and they're such good people that you would never really know that they struggled. You know, like my dad was homeless for 2 months, living in a park, didn't know anyone, didn't have money, didn't know the language, right? Like they've gone through so much, and their story is so incredible. And I'm always like, wow, we're so quick to see the end result, but what about the journey, right? And as I've started to sit back and reflect on my life, I noticed my journey, and, you know, Mike has a journey, Justin, I'm sure you do. And that's kind of what I want this space to be, like a place where the person and I can dig a little deeper, talk about things that are culturally important, educational, but also moments that are like super crazy, you know, the life moments that are nuts, and just kind of share the stories that need to be heard. And that's something that I've really wanted to do for a while, and really just create this space of conversation that forces people to change the way they think and the way they act, and to just really share people's stories, because everyone, honest to God, has one.
There's so much I want to unpack there, because you just gave us so much information. But first things first, I 110% agree with you. I think everybody has amazing stories, and everyone has a story that people don't really get to see.
Yeah.
Me, myself, being, I think, the first generation born in Canada. Like, my parents came from India, and my grandparents and all that as well. And like, to actually like sit there and listen to your parents and your grandparents about what they went through to be here, you realize that even though you might have it hard yourself, it's really like they went through some crazy stuff. Like, they did some crazy things just to be here, to give you the opportunity to be here. And I think that's a really cool way to let people share those stories. Secondly, have you ever followed that Instagram page, Humans of New York?
Mm-mm.
So there's a page on Instagram, and it's called Humans of New York. And basically, the really cool thing about that, which would probably be good for your social media, I'm just giving you some random ideas, is there's a gentleman, and he's like huge now, it's super popular, but he would go around, he talk to people that were in New York, and obviously New York's New York's a very diverse area with a lot of different kinds of people, and he would talk to them, and he'd ask them about the story if they were okay to share it, and he'd like take pictures of them, and the captions would just be a story, and it could be about anything. And there was one really, I'll send it to you, there's one really good one about this guy named Bobby Valentine, about escaping prison and getting married and finding the love of his life, and then she never found out that he was a prison escape person and stuff till way later, and this and that. It was like just a cool story, but like, you never hear these stories because they're not like public figures or people in the public eye where people are like, oh, I want to hear about this story. These are just regular people that have amazing stories. And I think there's an opportunity for you to do something like that with the show as well.
You know what, first, Justin, I want to say that your parents sound incredible, right? And like, I resonate with those stories, because sometimes when my mom and my dad talk about things that they went through, like my mom's like, I went through the time of Chernobyl, and I'm like, how, right? Like, I see this unbelievable life they've created here, and I'm like, I always say they've lived 2 lives in 1 lifetime, right? Like Poland, and then where they are now. And I think that people, like, it's so incredible, and I just have so much respect for them. So your parents sound incredible as well.
I mean, my dad got kicked out of his house, I think, at like 17, and worked on a ship and traveled all around South America and Europe and stuff. And he has all these coins and stamps from like Turkey and Peru and all these things.
Well, you know what, we're gonna
got married. It's insane.
We're going to need to get your dad on my podcast, because these are exactly the stories that I want to share. Like Mike's parents, their story is incredible. And like their love story, I've never, like their story's honest to God a movie. And these are the types of stories I want to get out there. And that's exactly what I want to do, because, you know, whether my whole theme is like, everyone has a story, what's yours? And people from all walks of life, whether you're a pro athlete or, you know, a well-known person, but also someone like my dad, which people might not know if they don't work with him or know him in the community, but someone who's gone through so much to create such an incredible life for his family, you know? So that's where my heart is. When I tell you that these last 2 weeks have been so amazing, like it's been very, I'm very blessed, because the reception from their podcast has been very positive. And that to me is like a sign that my heart's in it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm just ready to start creating what I've always wanted to do. And most importantly, like one of the taglines in a video that I'm going to release here shortly is like, I want people to learn, and most importantly, unlearn. You know, like there's a lot of things that we've been taught to think of a situation. Like, for example, like, you know, like so many things. I don't want to give too much away. Yeah. But that's the goal of my podcast, is to create change.
And it also, I think, will put a good spotlight about how grateful we should be for certain things that have changed. I mean, when I look at my parents, like I'm turning 30 in November. My mom already had like 2 kids by then. November 4th.
So we're both Scorpios. I'm November 18th. I knew we were good friends for a reason.
No, and I was gonna say that because I'm like, there's a lot of things I vibe with you on, and I think it's because we're both Scorpios. But there's things that you put out on social media, and I'm like, yo, I relate to that, or I get that, and I understand that, and we'll talk about that though. But another thing I want to talk about when it comes to Szwed Talk, I can't talk today. I don't know what it is. Is you put out that little promo piece, and that promo piece was a lot more directed the fact that what probably will be the first episode is just the way that you've had to present yourself in a certain way for so long because you were on television, you've been a host, you were on Sportsnet, but now you get to fully be yourself and you kind of finally get to react to all these comments that people have made of you in the past that you probably never really got to react to or address in the past. Do you get a lot of hate? Like I never envisioned you as someone that got hate from people. You
know what, Justin? I always say I'm very fortunate because the following that I have, are very supportive and loyal. So I'm very, very grateful. Social media for me isn't a toxic space. Of course, you're going to get a few people here and there who don't like what you do or decide to say something mean. But I try my best to kind of filter those out. For me, it's more so I feel like a lot of the time people saw me as this one-dimensional person, you know, solely based on what I was wearing, what I looked like, this job that I had. And of course, I was very grateful for my opportunity in the industry for the last 5 years. There's a lot of amazing things that I had the opportunity to do. But there's more to me than my hair and my makeup and the dress that I'm wearing. And I'm like, I have a story, you know, I've dealt with hardship. When I post a photo on Instagram, you know, smiling and happy, it doesn't mean that I don't have anxiety, you know, like there are things that have happened in my life that, you know, I'm not one dimensional. And that's one thing I want people to know. And it all stems from like my parents' story that just because you see someone doesn't mean you know. You know, and that for me is a very deep thing. And I would like to honestly start creating change, and especially for women in the industry, in any job industry. It's I want there to be a conversation about certain things that are said, certain things that are done, and how, you know, there's more to us than looks.
I think a big part of that from my perspective is it's like social media has really changed the perspective people have on people because they think they feel like they get to know people through social media or what they post on social media, where I'm like, I know myself, for example, like when I started my page, I blocked everyone from my personal life, friends and family, because I wanted to be a secret, because I knew I had to be an exaggerated version of myself. It's not really who I am. It's me turned up because I'm like, that's the only way I'm going to grow followers and whatnot. Yeah. And now we've come years later where a lot of my friends and family follow it, and I've kind of been more of a mixture of my actual self, and then they know Justin's, you know, he's extreme. But like there is a whole, I understand, because I'm like, there's a whole lot of people that like see like all the cool stuff I get to do, and like they look at the numbers and stuff. I'm like, they don't really know me, but then when I meet them and they act or they talk about me as if they do know me. And I'm like, yo, you know how stressful all this stuff can be sometimes? And I just come back out here putting a smile on my face. So I completely understand. And then when I saw you put out that video, I was like, damn, about time you got to show this other side of yourself, because I think people, you know, they take kindness as a weakness sometimes.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that so much because, and listen, I love my Instagram platform because I've had this rare opportunity to connect with very, very amazing people. Sorry, Mikey, can you grab that? Sorry, that just turned off. I've had the opportunity to connect with like really amazing people, and I want people to get a little window into my life. You know, like I think that's the beauty of social media, and I love using my social media for those interactions, for those engagements, for connecting with people, right? And that's exactly what I plan to use my podcast for. But you know, I am a nice person. You know, I always think that that's like the most important lesson my parents have taught me and my brothers, to be kind. But it doesn't make us weak. And, you know, I want people to know there's more to Caroline, there's more to Justin, there's more to Mike, there's more to my dog Cash than what you would see. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate to that. And I want to, you know, investigate and share that part of their journey with the world and kind of figure out why, you know, I don't want to give too much of on my season 1, but like you see the end result. Who's the human behind the end result, and how did you get there, and what was?
How did they get there? What made them go that direction?
Yeah. Because, you know, we all have a story. You know, Mike's, like, honest to God, the best physio, I swear to God, all of Alberta. But he didn't go to physio school until, you know, age 29. He had a whole completely different vision on what he wanted in his life. And then he tore his ACL. It changed complete different direction of his life. And now he, like, literally is the most popular physio. And I think that that stuff is incredible, because without that ACL injury, without that adversity, without that injury, he's not finding physio. And we believe in past lives. So I'm like, in a past life, he had to have been a healer because he's so good at what he does. And I'm like, he's not figuring out his purpose in this lifetime without that adversity. And I think that that's so beautiful at the end of the day. Just sitting back.
Because I've heard a ton about your story, and obviously, like, your professional soccer career and then sports and everything. And I want to talk about that too. But the way that we're having this conversation, I'm just going to go with where we're at.
Yes, please.
Are you a believer in a sense that everything happens for a reason?
Great question. Yes. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like that answer. I can't speak for anyone else's journey. I'm going to speak about mine.
But do you think you went on a major personal journey this past year from what I've seen?
Oh, personal. The last
Caroline and Matt in 2018 to who you are now, like, something happened in that middle.
The past 10 years, like, you know, 3 knee injuries. I thought I may be playing soccer for the rest of my life. 3 knee injuries. Last one, the surgeons were like, you have to stop playing. Went through a shit ton, to be quite honest. Complete identity crisis, because I was like, okay, well, now I don't have soccer. Like, what do I do? Figured out, okay, I'm going to be on camera. Ended up somehow getting on television. And then now leaving that space, leaving that world, now create a vision for myself. If all these hardships did not happen, if that accident did not happen in 2019, I'm not sitting where I'm sitting. I'm not feeling the joy that I'm feeling in this moment right now. I'm also not marrying the love of my life. So there are so many moments in the last 10 years that have absolutely rocked my world. But if God was, like, talking to me and was like, okay, do you want to go back in time and, like, not do that and have that not happen to you? I would absolutely never trade it for the world, because I am finally at a place of, like, discovering who I am at my core, my purpose in this life, and finally having the potential to have, like, the most beautiful work-life balance, you know? And that's something that I've strived for, because, Justin, let me tell you, when I was in that accident and the truck hit me, so I was hit off the highway by a truck, and my car went down these massive boulders down a ditch and flew into a tree.
Wow.
So when I got hit, I said it happened so fast. But the one thing that, like, all I could think about was my parents, like, my family, my dog, and the fact that at 27, I'm going to die, and I haven't met my husband, and I haven't had the opportunity to have children. Let me tell you, I did not give a shit about my job, the money in my bank account, the money in my savings account, my benefits, my car, my home. Literally did not even cross my mind. The only thing I could think about was family and love. And when I got out of that accident, that's where so much was changing in me internally. Like, I was like, okay, success isn't defined by Instagram, money, job. Success is defined by love, balance, joy, happiness, living in the moment. And all of this stuff was shifting in me internally, that when I wasn't living each day authentically and doing things externally that wasn't how I was feeling internally, it made me stressed, it made me exhausted, it made me unhappy. And then finally now I've had the courage, you know, a year and a half later to, you know, leave Sportsnet, leave that world that gave me, you know, national exposure, because it just wasn't fulfilling for me at a soul level anymore. So in my life, everything has happened for a reason. I love this conversation because my face is getting warm as I'm talking, which is, like, to me, such a sign that, like, you know, like, it's just your intuition. And I'm just very grateful for the process. Now, it's easier said than done, right? Because when the storm hits, you're like, seriously?
Yeah, because the way I look at it is this, because this is the concept or the theory I think I've come up to now at my older age. I'm only like 29 years old, but I used to think, like, okay, yeah, everything happens for a reason, but there were certain things that happened where I'm like, oh, it doesn't make sense. Like, I've had friends, you know, that passed away at a younger age. I grew up in a rougher neighborhood. Like, you know, I have friends who didn't even make it to 25, and then I'm old and I look back, I'm like, yo, that must have sucked, because so much of my life happened after, like, 23 and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't know the reason for that, but what I've learned is that if you look hard enough and you try hard enough and you look back at any good or bad situation, and you have to be a little bit optimistic. And I'm not one of those people that thinks you can be positive 24/7. I'm like the moodiest person you'll meet. I'm also not what everyone thinks I am in person. Like I am such a good social person. You can put me in any atmosphere and I can make it work. But I got like social anxiety most places when there's large crowd. And I'm like the biggest homebody. Like I'd rather be at home with 1 or 2 people that I like than being with like 30 people I don't like. It might be a Scorpio thing. Don't know. Yeah. But people think I'm like this social butterfly that wants to talk to everybody. And I'm like, I'm not. But that's not the point. The point is this, is that what I think I learned as I got older is if you do look back and you do look at any situation, and there might still be a shitty situation when you look back at it, there's a silver lining to everything. Like something came out of that led you to the person and what you're doing today. And if you're happy, because the key to life, in my opinion, is happiness, right? Like we should all be on this pursuit of happiness. Yeah. Once something stops making you happy or you stop finding joy in it, then you probably should stop doing it, because realistically, you're just going to be miserable. You're going to be unfulfilled. You're going to resent a lot of things. And I think we're just, I'm a big Mad Men fan. It's one of my favorite TV shows. And there's a line in there that Don Draper said which hit me hard one time, where he's like, happiness is just a feeling you get before you need more happiness. But then what I realized is a lot of people's happiness is this like materialistic side of happiness. They buy something new and they feel happy about it. They get a new car, they buy a new pair of shoes, they go on a trip, and all those things are amazing. And they do bring you happiness. It's great. I want to go on trips. I want to buy nice things every once in a while too and treat myself. That's not a bad thing. But those are temporary pieces of happiness. The moment you come home from that trip and you have to snap back in reality, that trip becomes a memory and now you're unfulfilled again. So do you think that if I say maybe not everything happens for a reason, but there is a silver lining to everything that happens because it leads you to where you are today?
I definitely believe that, and like I said, I can only speak for my journey, and I do believe that things in my life have happened for a reason, and I know why people argue against that, and I respect everyone's opinions, but like you said, I think for me, I was attaching success and happiness to the materialistic things, right? And that accident really forced me to change everything that I've believed to define success and happiness in my life. It really shook me hard. And now I'm so excited for this next chapter because my definition's changing. I'm taking control of my life. I'm in the driver's seat of creating something very beautiful for not only myself, but I believe a large community of people. And the skills and the work that I just learned over the last 5 years, I want to put to good use. And again, there's so much I could speak to in sports and injuries and body image and being a woman in the industry and, whatever it is. I feel like I've had certain experiences to have a platform to then create.
All your experiences that you had, whether they were good or bad, led you to be in the position that you're in today.
Literally.
I guess that goes back to everything happens for a reason, I guess. Because now you have all these avenues you can go into, whether it is talking about sports, whether it's talking about life, whether it's talking about the other things you're interested in and dealt with. I think that's super cool. How do you feel about the whole angel number thing? Because I'll be honest, I've been seeing a lot of 11-11s and 1-1-1s a lot in the past 3 months. And I'm like, I didn't really believe in it that much, so give it 2 years ago, but now I keep seeing it, and I'm like, you know what? Oddly, it's motivating me because I think something's going to happen. Like, it's just a mental game.
So I know a lot of people don't believe in this stuff too, but I'm very spiritual. So I love when I see repeating numbers, angel numbers, synchronicities, whatever you want to call them. And that's actually how I got into spirituality. I remember at the beginning of my journey, all I saw was the numbers 911, 911, 911. Everywhere I went, like 6 times a day. And I was like, you can't make this up, to the point where like it'd be the total on a receipt. So that's where I started Googling what these numbers meant. And a big one in my journey and Mike's journey and our journey together, oddly enough, has been 11-11. And we see 11-11 so much. And to me, when I see these numbers, it's kind of like I take a moment, remember what I was thinking about, and either recognize that as okay, you're on the right path, or if I'm having a negative thought, take a moment, rethink what you're doing, change your thoughts, because you could potentially be manifesting, right? Like, so it's just such a beautiful reminder for me. Like, if you're not thinking of the highest good for yourself and for everyone, shift your thinking, because you could be manifesting this in this moment. Or if you thinking of something so beautiful and so positive, and you're just having the best day ever, and you see 1111 or 111, you're like, wow, I saw that. Okay, I'm on the right track. Keep with this energy, because I don't think what people understand is like when you're vibrating at a high energy and you go around people, you will change their energy for the positive. Like, have you ever been around like the happiest people and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm so happy. That's how the world changes. We need more people to have like this high level of vibration, and the world will change. Because if we keep like going in the low vibrations and negativity and, you know, like all this anger, that's contagious too. So that's just what I love about those numbers. Sometimes I will have like a hard day or something that I'm dealing with, and I see it. It's almost a reminder, like, okay, shift, do your best, do your absolute best, easier said than done, to shift your mindset, shift your perspective, and try and, you know, course correct.
And I feel the exact same way, because when I see those numbers, it's a lot of the times like, and it is random. Like, it's not like I'm sitting there, like I'll literally be like walking, I look at my phone, like, oh, it's 11:11, or I look at my cable box, I'm like, oh, it's 1:11, and I just keep seeing them. And for me, it is more of a reminder of like, if I'm in a bad energy, if I'm feeling negative or whatnot, it's like, oh, this is the moment where it's like, yo, switch it off. Yep. Think of some positive stuff. Think about what you want in life. Manifest what you want. Like I think I'm a lot more spiritual than I am religious, to be honest. And I think a lot of that, I was curious about that too, because I feel like a lot of that's been happening for me. And I find myself to be more motivated now, because I think mentally, I think something's going to happen, even though it might not. And I'm like, and it's just like a good sign, you know?
Trust the process, Justin, and you're Scorpio. So you're very intuitive and very, very deep. So, you know, like,
I've been told.
Trust.
I overthink too much.
Literally.
I analyze everything to the T. And people are talking about what I can come up with, because like how I'm like, I know everything.
I overthink everything like it's a problem. Like Mike's like, how are you thinking of this? And I'm like, how are you not? Because my brain like explodes. I
don't know how to turn it off. Like I had to like try, like everyone, I have so many friends like, yo, Justin, like maybe learn how to meditate or something. Like try to figure out something to turn off your brain. I'm like, I don't know how to yet. Like I'll get there, but like every time I do, like I start thinking about something else. But I did find like actually going for runs have been really helpful. I started doing it a couple of months ago, and when I'm going for a run, and this is gonna sound like, you know, weird, but I have like this weird relationship with nature where like I don't like any music or anything on. I just kind of want to just hear the sound. And I live near a beach, right? Like I live by White Rock, so the goal is to get to the water and just hang out there for a bit and then get back. But like I think that's the closest thing I can get to when it comes to meditation.
Well, Justin, I don't think that's weird at all. I'm very similar. And you're very spiritual. I already know this. I feel like there needs to be an episode of you and I talking just about spirituality, because if
I had a feeling this was where this was going to go. So that's why I was like, let's get the podcast stuff out of the way at the beginning.
Well, you know what? Like a lot of people don't know that about me, right? Like when Mike and I first met, he was like, I didn't know that you'd be this spiritual. And I would love to let people, and that's what I mean, right? When you look at someone, you might not know all the layers to them until you get to know them. And that's where I would also allow, like, I would love to let people start coming into my life. Like spirituality is huge for me. I always said before I awakened to this journey, I felt like I must have been sleepwalking for 27 years of my life. And I would never go back. Like just knowing that there's more happening around us than we can see, and believing in something that's much bigger than us, you know, if it's God or energy or the universe, whatever you want to call it, there's so much, you know, peace in that. And I never will go back to a life where, you know, I don't pray, I don't express my gratitude, I don't say my affirmations. And I think that that's been an absolute staple in my life, and something that I want to start introducing to, you know, this image of Caroline.
I think more people that are like out there, like people know who you are. You're Caroline Szwed, you're on Sportsnet. If you're talking about this stuff, more people will listen about it. There's not enough people like that listening about stuff like this. Like I'm talking about it, and people that follow me are probably like, where did this come from? Where did this
I love this because it's another, you know, layer to Justin. And I love hearing that you go for a walk and don't put headphones in, because that might encourage someone else to try that. And you never know, that could be a form of meditation for them, and that could help them. And that's what I love about podcasts and like interviews and having conversations like the one you and I are having right now. Is like one person could take a second from what we're saying, apply it to their life, and be like, wow, this really works for me. I'm going to do this every single day. And
here's another thing I do, and I want to see if you think this is weird. Okay. When I'm talking on here, I feel like I'm putting it out there now, but I'm putting it out there for everyone to find out. I'm really big on sometimes sitting there and being like, if I'm going to make a big decision or if I'm about to do something stupid or whatnot, like, am I making the younger version of myself happy? Like if I think about 22-year-old Justin, I went through a weird, I always say like those high school Justin, that was kind of like a hood rat, grew up in the hood with my friends, did stupid shit, used to get in fights, machete across the hand, maced, all that fun stuff. And then there was Justin that moved to South Surrey, White Rock, who became, moved away from his high school friends, got a DUI, stopped hanging out with them that much, I was in a relationship and had my hippie phase. And I feel like there's so many different phases of myself that I always have, like when I'm making a big decision, I look back at all myself and be like, how would that version of me appreciate what I'm about to do right now? Will they be happy or proud of me? And I think that's like a really cool concept to think about, because you want to make yourself happy at the end of the day. But there's so many different parts and layers of who you were throughout your life, and you want to make that previous version of you happy as well, shouldn't you?
I love that, and I don't think that you're weird for thinking about that, because Mike and I always say, and this is why I love Mike so much, because he's the first person I met that I've been able to bond on a spiritual level with. And we always talk about growth, whether it's the stages of your life. I'm not the same person who I was a year ago, let alone when I was 15. But if you're not on a quest for growth and like constant rediscovery and constant, a death and a rebirth, then like, what are you doing? You need to be willing to grow. And, Mike and I, when we have kids, we're going to be different from who we are today to when we have children. And I hope that's because we're on this quest of growth and learning and evolving. And the minute you stop that kind of like thirst for that, I would say is a scary moment, because you have to constantly be willing to grow and also love the person who was 10 years ago or
100%.
of years ago. That's the beauty about life. And Mike's taught me that, because I'm very hard on myself. So I'm like,
same here. I'm my own biggest critic.
Literally,
all the time.
I'm constantly critiquing myself like nuts. And he's just like, chill. Like you're allowed to, be who you are. And like,
I called myself weird the last 4 minutes, like 3 times, because I thought, why am I saying this? That's me critiquing myself on the spot. It happens all the time.
No, don't, because I need you to know that when we like, this has been such a refreshing conversation with me, like for me, like it's very nice. So I don't, when you say these things, nothing that you have said has been weird but I'm the same way as you, because there are times where like, I love having these conversations so much that at the end I'm like, but wait, what did I just say? Because I loved it so much that I don't remember anything. And like, if the world knows Caroline, like, are they going to accept her? And that's so nerve-wracking, right? So exactly what you mean, but no, this.
What's so crazy? I will say, I think my entire life, and I'm very grateful for this. And this is me thinking back of me as a teenager and whatnot. I'm like, I'm very grateful that no matter how weird I've been my entire life and how different. And I don't think weird's like a bad term. I just think weird is when you don't understand someone else, it becomes weird, because you're a little different. It's not like you're some oddball off on the side. It's just that my thoughts and my interests might be a little different and weird compared to yours. It's not like a bad thing, but I'm like, I was always accepted, and I'm very grateful for that. Like, people always accepted me for me and all my quirks, and I'm like, I don't think I'd be as confident as I was if they didn't. And that's another way of me looking back and finding the silver lining and just being who I was. But yeah, I think I'm my own biggest critic too. It becomes an issue. But
it's crazy, because when I was in high school up until third year university, I was terrified to talk to people. My mom and I laugh at it till today. When I was in high school, I'd be like, Mom, what are we having for dinner? And she'd say pizza. And I'm like, sick. And she goes, but you need to order it. And I'd say, I'm not ordering it, because I'd be terrified to talk to the people on the phone. Because that's how introverted I am at heart. And if it wasn't for my knee injury in school, I would have never came out of my shell. So there's just, like that was Caroline from like age little girl to like third year university. I opened up way more in university, but I was still pretty shy. Never thought in a million years I'd be on television. I was planning on going and teaching English abroad, because I've always wanted to travel. And then I figured I might never play soccer again. How do I stay in sports? Okay, I'm going to be a TV reporter. And everyone was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you don't like talking to people. Like, you don't talk to people. And then I came out of my shell, and I had this like level of growth, level of evolution, level of transformation. And I think that's what's really cool about kind of looking on the journey and the hardships in my life personally. Like
and you probably for sure made that younger version of yourself proud. You do.
I hope so. But you know what? I love that introverted Caroline with braces and front bangs.
I don't think it ever really dies though, because sometimes you fall back into like you're just like I know there's been times I'm like, yo, like I just fall back into like a week. I'm like, yo, I fully just turned into like 22-year-old Justin. The music I'm listening to, the vibe I'm feeling, I'm like, I don't know where this came from, but I dig it. We're gonna have to snap back in reality soon, but like this is great. This is great. I needed this refresher. I need this me time. I need to do not disturb my phone, turn off the world, and just like chill and figure things out, you know?
How crucial is that though? Like honestly, I'm like you. Like I love interacting with people, but when I have like a couple days that have been very heavy with work or going out and speaking or whatever, I'll come home and recharge for like a solid 2 days, and that's crucial for me. Like I'm talking about like get grounded, shut stuff off. Like I won't even watch sports. I might just turn on like a Netflix show and binge, until I fall.
Like anti-wrestling, I completely understand. Like the last thing I want to do right now is watch wrestling. Anything
and that has nothing against the wrestling world or sports. Yeah. We love this stuff, but sometimes it's so necessary to shut down, recharge, and then like get ready for the next few days. Like I'm with you, and I think that's because at heart we're introverts who like to talk and socialize at times, but very much need their own time in their home and their shell. I love my shell.
100%. I'm like, I always joke around and say it's not. I don't actually mean it, but I'm like, you know what? For someone who's so good with people, I really don't like people, and it's weird because like. I say it till this day, I think we've had this conversation before, and we'll talk about that next for a little bit. But where I was like, when I get really old, I'm like, I really just want to I want to be successful. I want to achieve what I want to achieve in life. And then I just want to fall off the grid. And I want to live in a house. And the one thing, I don't want like nice everything, but I want a nice house for sure. I want it to be by water. I want it to be surrounded by trees. I want nobody to be able to come in and get out. And maybe I'll throw a party once or twice a year, like The Great Gatsby, like it's invite only. But other than that, like I just want to hide, grow my own garden and all of this stuff. And just, I'm
trying to think we're like weirdly related. Because honestly, like I've always said that my dream's to have an off the grid house near water in nature, enough where like you can drive to the grocery store and like
and we're in an era where you can order your grocery now. This is great.
Literally. So that's like my dream. But of course, right? Like I think it's still okay for us to say that we want a nice home, and a goal of mine is to have a boat, because for me there's nothing more beautiful than being on the water. I have
this weird obsession with water too, and I don't know why.
I love it too. I think it's because we're water signs. I feel like so to me it's like you're allowed to want abundance. Like everyone should want to be abundant, and in whatever form that is for themselves. So that's kind of like what fuels me. I'm like, for me, someone asked me a little while ago, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I'm like, my answer, if you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have had the exact job, the exact paycheck, the home, everything nailed for you. And now this is where we're telling about growth in a year. My answer now is, whatever I'm doing in 10 years, I hope to just experience joy. I don't care if I'm on television. I pray to God I'm still doing my podcast. Maybe I'll open an animal shelter. Whatever I'm doing, I pray it's just absolute joy level, life.
Were you someone who once upon a time like really feared failure? Like it really got to your head if you failed?
And I think that's because, being on the Canadian national team for soccer and D1 sports, and then all of a sudden setting these massive expectations for myself to be on television, failure is what would, like, when I had that third knee surgery and I couldn't play anymore, I didn't take that as, this journey has ended. I took that as you failed to come back, to stay healthy, and to go to the Olympic Games, which was my biggest goal. And I think what led me down a road of anxiety, depression, just like identity loss. And that's kind of been the biggest lesson for me in this life is, one, to be patient and let life unfold in the time that it's supposed to. And two, don't be so hard on yourself. In order to be successful, you have to fail. And a lot of the moments that I've considered failing really weren't. And that's the beautiful thing about me creating Szwed Talk. This was something I've wanted to do for years, and I hadn't, because the number one thing that would pop into my head is, are you going to fail? Are you going to do this? And no one's going to give a crap about what you want to do and your vision, and people are gonna look at you like a joke. I've completely eliminated all that, noise that my own head has created, and I've now been like LFG, like.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you make that connection, then you're like, you know what? Once you fail a few times and you realize there's some beauty in that bullshit, and you've learned from it, and you grew from it, there's that whole like, you're kind of more down to risk failure. Like you're more like, oh, I can handle it now. Like if it happens, it's like I know how to come out of it and find a silver lining out of that failure. And I think when you are someone that's really hard on yourself about failure, because if you're someone that's been nonchalant your entire life, sometimes it won't benefit you. But if you're someone that feared failure at one point in your life and you failed and you felt like the whole world came crashing down around you, man, does that make you so much more powerful in the future.
I agree. And like a lot of the most successful people that have had stories of failure, or a moment where, they didn't make a sports team, or they didn't get the job, but they've put themselves out there and they were vulnerable. And that's the key. And that's where it was with Szwed Talk. I'm like, okay, I had a day or two where I was like, what are you doing, Caroline? Like, you think you can do this in like such a saturated business and like no one cares, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, no, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to share my story. I'm going to share other people's story, and we're going to create change. And I believe in the law of attraction. I believe in manifestation, and I've just created a different story and have used different words to kind of tell the universe what I want this to be. And I believe for a fact that when I'm vibrating high and I'm feeling all this positivity and joy, the only direction my life can go in is, a positive direction. Of course, there's going to be bumps along the road and difficult moments, but I'm going to be creating the life that I want based on the thoughts that I'm thinking. And I really, really believe that.
No, I'm with you. And I think the best advice I've ever got for anyone that is listening to this and they're thinking about starting something is just start. Just do it. There's so many things and so many excuses you can make up to why not to do it. Like, when I started a wrestling podcast, I'm like, man, there's 10 million thousand wrestling podcasts. There's wrestlers and backstage people doing wrestling podcasts. Why would anybody want to listen to me and stuff? And then I just started, and people started listening, and it started growing. And I was like, the biggest thing is just start. I think a friend of mine, Cleo Thomas, he was in Holes as Zero. He's the one that's like, go Google Joe Rogan's first episode of his podcast. And it was just two dudes sitting on a couch with like the worst quality. And look where it is now. And it's just because he started and he took that initiative and he put himself in that comfort zone. Out of curiosity, though, ask someone who's an introvert and whatnot, just because, like, sometimes I'm kind of the same way. And it's like, I got to do something. Like, how do you prepare yourself to, like, put yourself in front of the camera, like, confidently? Like, when the camera came on, did you just turn on? Like, how did that work?
Great question. Okay, so I think sports helped me, right? Like, I'd be nervous before games, like very nervous. But once I was on the field and the whistle blew to start the game, I would be like, this is like my bread and butter. Like, play, right? Like adrenaline almost hit me, right? And who you're getting right now is like, this is me, right? Like when I go over to my future in-laws house or my friend's house, or I'm around my own family, like I'm so bubbly and like energetic or whatever, but there's still an element of shyness to me. Like I've really grown from high school Caroline and introverted Caroline. I have now another level of confidence, but sometimes there are moments where I second guess myself, where I'm like, okay, like how do I properly communicate what I'm feeling? And with television, it was just so nice for me because it was the closest I felt to being on the soccer field. I always described it as that. Like it was like as soon as the camera turned on and record hit and 3, 2, 1, we're live, it was okay, now you're playing soccer. The pressure's on, you know what you're doing. You know exactly what you're saying. You know what you're talking about. Just have fun and play the game. And that's like, you talk about the journey. I swear I was supposed to play soccer, to do this, to learn the skill set of soccer, to put into the industry, to learn everything I did in the industry, to now do my own thing, you know?
I just think that all your experiences helped the next thing you did. Yeah. And it goes back to that everything might happen for a reason.
Literally. But what I will say is, like, my favorite part of what I've always done on TV is the interviews or Aftermath, where I'm in a setting of talking to others and having a conversation about something. I loved being in the studio, but the interaction with other human beings and people is what really brought me joy. And that's, you know, we want to talk about WWE Superstars. I love them so much because their stories are incredible. Their personalities, how, you know, they can go into character and not go into character. I remember interviewing being like, wow, these people are incredible. They are so talented. And every single time I'd be on Aftermath and they would show like a spotlight of an interview of a wrestler, and I'd be like, at the end, I'd be like, wow, they were like my favorite. I love them so much. And everyone would laugh at me. They're like, Caroline, you say that about everyone. But I'm like, it's true. That's the feeling they left me with every single time I talked to one. And that's the joy that I felt on being on camera, because it became less about being on camera and being a reporter and more about being a human being who's talking to another human being. And I loved that.
So let's talk about that, because for me, that's kind of where I discovered you. Like, don't get me wrong, I watched Sportsnet all the time. Like I always say, like the things I usually used to, I don't do it much anymore because now I've been listening to podcasts, but there was a point in my life, like before I went to bed, one of the two channels that I'd sometimes fall asleep to because sometimes I needed sound to pass out was the Food Network and Sportsnet. Like those are the two channels. There'd be sports highlights and there'd be the Food Network. And for some reason I could go to sleep to that stuff. And Aftermath is where I discovered you. I've been an Aftermath fan since it was Renee and Arda and Jimmy, and I've seen the evolution of it all the way up until today. And that's where I discovered you. That's where I recognized you when I saw you at WrestleMania 35 in New York. I'm like, hey, that's Caroline Szwed from Aftermath. I'm gonna go say hello. It's another Canadian. This is great. But how was your experience with Aftermath? How did you enjoy doing the wrestling show? What is your background with wrestling? Did you grow up a wrestling fan at all, or was it something you had to learn to love?
So when my dad first came to Canada, weirdly enough, that's how he learned English. He would watch WWE all the time. His favorite, he calls him Giant Andrew, which is so cute, but his favorite was Andre the Giant. So it was always on the TV, right? But when I really started getting into WWE is when I would watch Total Divas on the E! Network when I was in the US. So I loved it. And based on like the things that were on the house when I was growing up and whatnot, like I've always had an interest in it. And then obviously in my role at Sportsnet, I became like very committed to every Monday Night Raw, Tuesday Night SmackDown when it was on Tuesday, you know, NXT is my favorite. But
you're a real wrestling fan. You like NXT. Okay.
NXT shows, like, honest to God, it blows my mind. So I just, loved the Aftermath panel. I can't say enough amazing things about Jimmy Corderas, Nug, and Anthony. Those guys, working with them every Tuesday was just such joy, and they made it so fun, and you just kind of never knew where our conversation was going to go. You know, a cool thing about Aftermath that people don't know is like we all have, you know, a little headphone in our, like a little mic in our ears. So we're constantly getting notes from the producer. So it's kind of like a different setting than what I'd normally be in, right? Like I would quarterback the entire conversation and keep everything on track and just have so much fun talking with these guys about like The Fiend, which is so entertaining, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, like show all of the interviews that we all did and you know, some super amazing people like Drew McIntyre. I love Alexa Bliss, Carmella, you know, just such an amazing experience. And Aftermath, I would have to say, and the WWE portion of my job was by far my most favorite part of the job. So I hope that, you know, one day I could get even some of these WWE superstars on my podcast. I know a lot of them have an amazing journey.
Yeah.
So I just have a lot of respect for them, like a ton. I always say, even if you're not a WWE fan, WrestleMania should be on your bucket list just for the experience and the production and entertainment value that you get going there. Like it's incredible.
100%. I just say generally, like, just go to a live wrestling show and you'll feel like a kid again.
You know what? You're so right. I took my mom to a house show in Toronto, and she was like on her, like she was like screaming, like, oh my, like I think it was Braun or someone. She's like, oh my God. I'm like, wow. It's like this lady's seeing WWE for the first time, and she's I love it.
It's just something when you walk, it was in most arenas, you walk through the curtain, you see the arena. If it's in a stadium, you just walk in and you see it. But like when you see the ring and the setup and everything, you're like, I don't know, you just automatically turn back into a kid again. Because I think at some point, mostly like in my friend group or people that I know, like they watched wrestling once upon a time at some point. And when they see that, I'm just like, no, you got to go. And I tell my friends, I'm like, you just got to go to WrestleMania 110%. Like, you just got to go. It's like, I don't like baseball. I'm not a baseball fan. I grew up watching hockey and basketball. Those are my sports. But the whole time I moved to California for 6 months and we went to an A's game or something, like it was just a great atmosphere to be there, and it felt fun. It felt like you were doing something cool. And I think it's the same thing with professional wrestling. And you go to have a different appreciation for what it actually is, because it's a hard task to be a professional wrestler. I'll tell you that much.
And what I love about the WWE Universe is that WrestleMania can go on for 8 hours, and they are as excited as the first minute to the last minute. It's like this ball of energy for the entire show. You know, like a soccer game's like 90 minutes, right? And then by the end, I'm like, okay, time to go home. But at WrestleMania, I'm like, we're in hour 5 and we're just getting started, you know? And I love that. I love that about the WWE Universe. And I also have to say that I feel like the WWE followers that I have on social media are so loyal, and I love them for that. And they're just so awesome. So I don't know.
Yeah, I want to bring that up because, like, for those that don't know, for like the Americans and the people around the world listening to this, Sportsnet is the largest sports network here in Canada, and it features all of WWE's programming. Raw, SmackDown, NXT, main event, you name it, it's on Sportsnet. And Aftermath was a recap show they did every week for years now, but it was usually after or before SmackDown. Sometimes it was after SmackDown back in the day, but it's a recap show that they did for years now on Sportsnet. And Caroline was on the show. When they came to Toronto, you got the opportunity to come out there and kind of, you know, address the crowd. And it's something that Aftermath hosts have been able to do over the years. How was that? Like, to walk out of Gorilla, come out there, address the crowd, and know that because you were in your hometown, they embraced you. Because I've listened to them, like, oh, they know who she is because you're like, you know, you're Toronto's own.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is such a good question because, and no one's asked me this before, but you want to talk about introvert Caroline having prepped to be extrovert Caroline. Okay. I've never done anything like that. Next thing you know, you're coming out to like 20 to 25,000 people. Right. And I'm like, okay, some people in Toronto know who I am, but not everyone. Right. So I don't want to go to like crickets or, God forbid, like boo. So the entire day we were working, we were doing interviews or whatever, and all I could think about was like, okay, you're coming out to 20 to 25,000 people. Get your shit together. Don't mess up. And Justin, I was so nervous that I didn't eat a single thing all day. It's not like me. You're kidding. I just smashed a donair pizza. Yeah. We went to a restaurant before the show started, and I ordered soup because I was like, okay, this is all I can eat. And I didn't even eat like any of the soup because I felt so sick. So by the time like we get back into the stadium or the arena, and I'm waiting, and we're in Gorilla, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, you're doing this. Yeah. And I went out there, and as soon as I addressed Toronto, and I was like, hello, Toronto, and I got such a beautiful response. And of course, it's not like I know that the Toronto community is amazing, but like, if you're like me, the only thing you think about is like worst case scenario, right? Like, I was like, I've never done this. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm automatically going to like the worst case possible. But everyone was so responsive, and people are so nice, and they were waving, and, you know, like, then you kind of feed off the crowd, right? Like, I changed my script up a little bit. When I got off that stage, I was like, this was freaking awesome. And like, introvert Caroline can go to extrovert Caroline anytime, any day of the week. Like, I got such an adrenaline rush, and this is what I mean. Like, that's the closest thing I can feel like back to my soccer days, because I'd be nervous before a game. I'd start playing. I'd have the game of my life, and then I'd be like, whoa, okay, like, I'm addicted to this feeling. That's exactly how I felt doing that. And, you know, like, I talk about the WWE followers being so loyal. You know, they would post to their Instagram stories and just have my back and say how proud they are of me. And I just appreciate all that love so much, because that was growth for me, you know, and it made the second time I did that, the following year, not like easy, because you're still have nerves, but much easier, much more confident, much more supported. Like, that to me was such a career highlight. And talking to Ronda Rousey, because she's just awesome. So like, she's amazing. Like, she was so in the interview, like, intense, which I loved, because that's Ronda Rousey, right? And I respect that, because she's just such a powerhouse. But then I think a week later or something, she was at a house show in Toronto, and I saw her, and she's like, oh, you were the girl like who interviewed me, Sweet Caroline. And I was like, wow. And we gave each other a hug, and I was just like, this is the best day of my life. Like, she is Ronda Rousey, you know, and she was just so nice, so humble, and just like such a sweetheart. I just have so much respect for her. So between Ronda and that WWE announcement, I believe before Raw and SmackDown, was just absolute career highlights for me. And I got to give kudos to the Toronto.
Did you get to meet Vince or Triple H or Stephanie at all?
Yes, I did. I did one with, I was on a panel with Triple H. Steph wasn't there. Triple H, Charlotte, AJ Styles, a couple others that are, but I've talked to Steph. I think Steph McMahon's freaking awesome. Like, she's so awesome. Triple H is so awesome. Every single person I've met, like, I think Alexa Bliss is just so great. Like, I love her. Yeah. Every single superstar that I've had the pleasure to meet is just, Kurt Angle to me was amazing. When I was sitting next to Kurt Angle, I'm like, wow. Like, I'm sitting next to Kurt Angle. That's insane. Who would have been your favorite interview then out of all those interviews? Favorite interview, I had a really good one with Titus O'Neil because his story is unbelievable. I loved my interview with Titus. And the interview with Ronda was short, but I think that was the only time in an interview, whether I was talking to hockey players or basketball players or whatever, Ronda's the only time where I was like, wow. Like, I never had like a fangirl moment in my career except for Ronda, because I was just like, she's a badass. No, for sure. When we met, you were wearing a Ronda jacket, the Ronda talk line. Shout out to talk line. But yeah. I should have worn that today, but this one was more important. We're going to talk about that next. I have one last Western question, though, and then we're going to talk about the other side of Caroline that I got to know. But first, last wrestling question. As of right now, currently, if you had to pick your favorite male wrestler and your favorite female wrestler on television right now, who would it be? Okay, I have two for. Oh my god, I can't pick. Okay, I know, put you on the spot, 'cause, I hate when people ask me this. 'Cause I'm like, yo, like, a lot of them like follow me now, and you're putting me on the spot. Someone's gonna get upset. I went through a whole situation. It was funny because I'm like the biggest Sasha Banks fan, and I have been. Like, you are. And I remember I posted, I'm like, yo, I'm a Sasha Banks guy. And Carmella, who's just a sweetheart, has been nothing but kind to me over the years. You mentioned Total Divas earlier, which I personally think is a great show to bring more female viewers into professional wrestling because it's a good conduit for that. But she rocked the Wrestling Classic merch on Total Divas, which was like the nicest thing ever. I just randomly gave her a sweater. She's like, yeah, I'll take one for sure. And then I saw her at a show like months later. And during the commercial break, she saw me in like the front row, and she came up to me. She's like, "Hey, how's it going? So nice to see you." She's like, "Yo, just letting you know, like, your sweater that you gave me might show up on Total Divas." And I thought, like, oh, it might just show up like on a montage or like some backstage thing with her walking backstage and getting their makeup done. It showed up for an entire scene where Sonya Deville showed up at her apartment, and she was breaking the news that she was dating Corey Graves. A pivotal scene in the show for Total Divas fans, and I was like, yo, that's so dope. But it's so funny because like we become cool with each other. We're acquaintances, and she's always nice to me. But I was like, yo, I'm a Sasha Banks guy in the middle of their feud. And she was like, oh, I see how it is and stuff. And I'm like, man, I really got to be careful. Obviously, she was joking, but like, you really got to be careful about what you say. It's so funny you bring up Carmella because I love Carmella. She's such a sweetheart. Always been so kind to me in interviews and after interviews. And I just think that she's just so beautiful and sweet and funny. Like, I love watching her Instagram stories, and her laugh is like so infectious. Yeah. It's so she's a Scorpio too. I think we all like each other. Yeah, oh my God, I wish I knew that. Like, I just love her. So I would say for women, it's honestly Alexa Bliss and Carmella. I can't pick between the two of them. I have interviewed them both, a few times, and I think that they're so talented. My favorite male wrestler or WWE superstar to watch right now, I'm a big Braun Strowman fan, but I love what Bray Wyatt's doing. I think like The Fiend. I love scary movies and like I love Halloween. Okay, like I'm obsessed with it. And in The Fiend, when I saw The Fiend at the house show in Toronto, like up close, I was like, this is to get into character for that and to watch that and to see it live and to see Bray Wyatt's character develop over the years has been, so amazing. And I think that he's finally like doing what he feels he wanted to do. Yeah. And so to me, that's kind of, and but I love, like, honestly, it's such a hard pick for me because I love Drew McIntyre, like there's just so many people that I've had the pleasure to talk to and watch on television that I swear my mind changes like every pay-per-view. I'm like, I want this person to win, and then I want this person to win because I love them, and then I love them too. So I don't know, I'm all over the place, but definitely Alexa Bliss, Carmella, they've been, you know, nothing but sweethearts to me. And I watch them and I'm like, whoa, like they're so talented. Alexa Bliss, her promos, you know, how hilarious she is. Like she's just so good.
So good at what she does as a character.
Literally.
Like anyone can say whatever they want about her wrestling. I'm like, yo, she's such a good character. She nails it on the promo. She knows exactly what her character is supposed to be. And when you know that someone is portraying something on screen that is so different from who they may be in real life, they're really good. That means so like.
Literally, and one other person, she's no longer at WWE, but I love Renee. I think Renee is like
a gem. I don't think I would have started doing these again, these casual conversations. I stopped doing them for a bit after Shad Gaspard passed away. But when I saw the opportunity that Renee wasn't with the WWE no more, and like we've always just had a good repertoire talking to each other, I'm like, yo, I'd love to talk to Renee and just do one of these. And I brought it back. And now here I am doing it with you. I did one with Danny, Ken Shamrock. I'm like, okay, I guess the casual conversations are back. And I give a lot of credit to Renee being like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, okay.
She's so amazing, the most talented human in the industry, and just so nice. Like every time I would be around her, I'd be like, just, she doesn't know this, but I'd be staring at her and I'd be like,
right?
You're amazing. Like, thank you for paving the road for women. You're amazing. So I'm a very, very big fan of hers. And obviously she took, you know, over the WWE scene like crazy. So I know she's not there anymore, but to me is always like as she's an icon. She's a legend.
No, and I tried to tell her that when I did the interview with her. I'm like, you do understand. I'm like, you're so cool that you don't notice that you're that cool, because there's a whole generation of kids. Because like I grew up obviously with like me and Gene and like Sean Mooney and like Todd Grisham and all these hosts, and I remember all of them. Like I hold it, Jonathan Coachman. Like I hold a special place for all those people. Jim Ross, it's not because they were personalities that were on WWE television that are part of my childhood, and I'm always gonna be nostalgic for those people. I'm like, there's a whole generation of kids that are gonna be nostalgic to Renee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their favorite interviews, their favorite moments, you know, it's going to involve you. And I know it's hard to think about that about yourself. So let me tell you that you're going to be remembered as this person for a generation of kids. They're going to like, they'll see you and they're like, oh, Renee, she used to be on WWE all the time and part of my childhood. And that's insane.
No, she's amazing and she deserves that recognition. She's so humble that she probably, you know, doesn't look at it that way. But I think every time I'd see her on TV or watching her in action or even talking to her at Sportsnet, she came by once. I'm like, she's so cool.
100%. Now, last but not least, I want to talk about something else that is very important to you. I'm a very big person of finding things that people are passionate about. Like I just find awe when people are passionate about things and have like a certain drive to do things that like, I don't know, like they just have like goals and things that they want to do that are so like genuine and honest and pure that I want to help them out achieve that stuff. It's just like I always say, when I get old, when I'm living in my secret house by the lake and hidden, that I still want to be able to like give a scholarship out to some creative people out there that come from a messed up background but just need a helping hand to get started or that push. Like I want to like interview kids and like see if they really have it, and if they do, be like, okay, I'm gonna help you out. I'm gonna connect you with the right person. That's why I network with everybody, even outside of the wrestling bubble. People are like, why do you talk to like models and actors, this and that? I'm like, listen, one day maybe I won't want to do something with wrestling and I want to get into music or something. Who knows? And also, when I want to help someone in the future, this model that's an aspiring singer might pop off and I can connect some young kid in the future. Like, hey, I know this person. They can mentor you. Like, I'm pre-planning for like decades from now. But the one thing I notice about you is you're very, very, very in touch with you wanting to, you know, help pets. Like you worked at the Toronto Humane Society. There's a whole story behind the legend, the myth itself, Cash. That when I got into this whole situation of, oh, you know, I started talking to you guys a bit, talked to you, I talked to Nug, and I'm like, I want to send you guys all shirts, you know, Rep Wrestling Classic, something I do. I send shirts to everybody. And I was like, you know what, for Caroline, because I knew how much you cared about it and how much you loved your dog and just how much you cared about, you know, people adopting pets rather than, you know, behind them and stuff. Like, I'm like, I'm going to get something extra cool made for her. And I got, you know, my boy Vinitude Art to Vinay to create that drawing. He actually drew that himself. And then we're like, you know, let's throw this on a sweater and let's send it out to you. But
I mean, guys, like, the literally looks exactly like this. It's crazy how accurate this is.
I when he nailed it, I'm like, yo, that's insane. And I was like, can we put like Adopt Don't Shop on this? Like, make it a thing. But the stage is yours now. I want you to talk about Cash. I want you to talk about your goals for the future, because I know from the conversations we have, you've told me yourself, like, it's a big dream of yours to open your own shelter.
Yep. Okay. So Cash has completely changed my life. He's turning 6 in June this year, and like God gave him to me at a time in my life where like I didn't know it, but after I got him, like 3 months later, I swear he gave me him for a reason, because I need that dog. And Cash has been with me through so many like moments in my life of change and adversity, and this dog has taught me so much about myself and love and compassion and giving back. And I know that a lot of people who aren't pet people are like, oh, it's just a dog. But to me, Cash is, again, I believe in past lives. I'm like, him and I were bonded in a past life. Like, there's no other way to explain it. The day I was in my accident, my mom was actually watching him, and she was like, all day, he was weird. He was in the corner. He wouldn't come near us. Like, she's like, I thought he was sick. Like, I was going to take him to the vet. And then when I called my mom saying, I got into this accident, she was like, oh my God, like Cash must have felt it, or like knew something was going to happen. And I kid you not, when I came home and I spent like that month at home, for like the first week, Cash would not leave my side. Like, he'd fall asleep on me and he wouldn't move. He wouldn't care to play with his toys. He wouldn't do anything. He wasn't like a regular dog. He just sat with me. And there's just such a bond between him and I felt this responsibility. And I don't want to call it responsibility because it comes from my heart, but this paying it forward almost responsibility of helping these dogs in shelters, because God forbid, I look at Cash and how much he's like helped me. I would never want these dogs to have to be euthanized or stay in the shelter any longer than they have to, when they can live this beautiful life outside and get another chance and help their human. Like, it's all about love, right? Like, it's all about a give and take relationship with these animals, and they're just way more than a dog or a cat or a turtle or whatever you get. And Cash's story is beautiful because he was in the shelter. He was 2 months when I came in and I saw him, and all the puppies were like barking, blah, blah, blah. And he was so sick. Like, his nose was all dried with mucus and it was right up to the crate. And I was like, oh, like, what's wrong with that dog? And they said, oh, he's really sick. We don't think he's going to make it, like, take a look at the other ones. And I was like, no. I'm like, this is my dog. And at that time they wanted to, neuter him, because the rule with adopting dogs is that they get neutered or spayed. So before you take them home, I had drove like 4 hours to just on a whim check out the shelter. So I was like, I'm not driving back 4 hours without this dog. Plus he's 2 months. Plus I feel like his immune system's compromised. So he might not make it through that, And I completely kicked into mom mode. Like, I was like, these people were so nice. Like, the shelter was lovely, but I was like, I'm not leaving him. So they finally like agreed to give him to me and made me promise that, I would get him neutered or whatever. I came home, he was so sick, pneumonia, coughing, like literally I was like, oh my God, this dog's not going to make it. He was on antibiotics for a long period of time. Then I found out he had worms, a very bad case of worms, wasn't digesting anything he was eating. And that day he started to like pass out on a walk. And I was like, okay, this is the day where, he had 2 weeks of love and a home, and I need to prepare myself. And he went to the vet, made it through, was on antibiotics for another few months, came out stronger than ever. And the only problem is that since his antibiotics were so strong, it stopped the growth of his teeth. So his teeth then got stuck in his gums, and then he got an infection from that. So the vet was like, if we don't pull all of his teeth, he'll die from infection. So that's when I had to extract all of his teeth. And that's why his tongue hangs out.
Yeah. That's characteristic. I like it.
It makes him who he is. And honest to God, knock on wood, he has not had a problem since. He's so healthy. He's so happy. He's changed my life. And every time I look at him, like, I'm sure it's annoying to people, but like, my God, he could just be sitting there and I'm like, don't move. You're perfect. And I like take a million photos. But he is very, very, very special to me, something that's just beyond a dog. And it's interesting that what you said about scholarships, because the day I went into the shelter, there was a man, and I have no idea who he is, but I think he owned like a car dealership or something. He went into the shelter that day and told them, every single person who comes in and adopts an animal today, I'm going to pay for their adoptions. And I told Mike, I said, one day when, we have the money to do that, that's something I would like to do. I'd like to walk into a shelter, let them know that, you know, even promote the fact that, you know, these adoptions will be paid for, and do that like in memory of Cash, and pay it forward for what that man did, because I think that that's actually beautiful, and that's a nice way to give back to the community, and, you know, help these animals, because they're so special. Like I can't even begin to describe, like, dogs and cat. I love every animal possible, and they have a soul, and they're just amazing. And when I would volunteer at the Toronto Humane Society, that's where I would feel, I mean, don't get me wrong, it broke my heart to see them, but when I'd go back the following week and they weren't there because they got adopted, I'd be like, yes, like, all right.
Nice feeling.
They found a home, you know, and that made me so happy.
Is it something you still want to do to open a shelter, or are you just more on the, is that still the end goal for Caroline?
Of course, I would love to. Whether it's like one day creating a vision where I could give some proceeds to an animal shelter, or really teaming up with an animal shelter, or creating something that gets these animals at a shelter exposure, 100%. And if I had the means and the land and everything and the resources to open a shelter, I would not think twice about it. My goal is to open up a shelter for like senior dogs. So they're not stressed out in like a typical shelter environment, and just kind of have them, and if someone wants to come by and look at a senior dog, for, you know, to come to my place or my barn or whatever, yeah, and look at them, but to just create a space of comfort for them, because that breaks my heart. I honestly can't even think about it. If I hear these stories about people leaving their dogs on the side of the road or whatever, it actually makes me very, very sick. Like, I'm not a confrontational person, but if I ever had someone do that, I would write down their license number and call it.
No, fair enough. No, I really wanted you to share that, and it was one of the things that stood out to me about you when we first, like, you know, started interacting and talking and stuff. I'm like, yo, she's definitely very passionate about this. She cares a lot, and it's cool to see someone that cares about something so much. Like, when I find out what someone cares about, like, I always want to highlight that, because I think, you know, people always get to see, like we talked about earlier, that goes all the way back to the beginning. People only get to see like this one side of you most of the time, but then it's like, yo, there's so many other layers to people too, and so many other things they're passionate and they care about, and those things should be highlighted as well. You know, most people will be like, Justin's a wrestling guy, but then when they follow the page and they start flipping through my story, like, oh, this guy loves all sorts of type of music, and he likes this and he likes that, and it's like, cool, good. I want you to know there's more to me than just wrestling. And
you're a spiritual guy.
Yeah, now we learned that. Now everyone's got to learn that I'm a spiritual person who thinks a lot, and and there's other things we never got to talk about that I also agree with, like this whole old soul past life thing. The fact that I have like the biggest fascination with like vintage stuff and like old TV shows, and I'll sit there and I'll like listen to an album or I'll watch an old show, and I'm like, why do I feel like at some point in my life I watched this before and I liked it? Because why am I enjoying it right now? Why do I feel like it's so familiar to me, even though I've probably never seen this before? Like, I can watch an episode of like Happy Days and I'm like, why do I feel like I know this? Like, and it's like something I grew up watching.
This is a whole other episode that if you feel like talking about, I'm 100% game, because I really believe in this stuff. And again, you're a Scorpio, so I'm not surprised. There's no way you're a soul. You're a very old soul. And if you like to walk along the water and listen to nature, you're an old soul.
Yeah, and I'm like that grumpy old man sometimes. It's like, even though I'm all about technology and stuff, I'm like, you kids need to get off your phones and your iPads and go play outside. Go play Cops and Robbers or something. Go play street hockey. Go take a soccer ball. Play one touch. I don't know. Do something.
Literally, we're the same, because like, obviously what I do is very heavy in social media and technology and digital marketing, which I love. But there are times where I'm like, I played like Manhunt until the streetlights came on. Like,
we would just stand in each other's driveways talking to each other, doing absolutely nothing. But it was like the best time ever.
Honestly, and those were the best. Like, honestly, I'd wake up at like 7 a.m., be in the pool all day. No one would see me, and like, or on the bikes around the block. We would never be inside watching TV ever.
And we had computers, we had video games, but our parents would kick us off. They'd be like, you can't play no more. Get out of here. And we'd have to like go figure out a game with our imagination. And I feel like that's lost.
The 90s, eh? Because you're 91.
I'm 91, yeah.
Me too. So the 90s are just, those were the days.
Those were the days. This could go for like a whole nother hour.
We'll have another chat. That's how we have to end this, is like, To be continued.
To be continued. Another casual conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna let Caroline plug her stuff. Where can everybody find you?
Okay, at Caroline Szwed or at Szwed Talk. SZWED. I think you can see that, right? The app was perfect.
And for those listening, she spelled it for you. This is still going to be uploaded on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and everywhere else you guys listen to the TWC show. Guys, go follow Caroline Szwed. Go follow Szwed Talk. Keep your eyes posted. The podcast is dropping in April. There's tons of things and tons of interviews and tons of stories. If you enjoyed this and this whole random conversation we had today about manifesting and life and spiritual stuff, you're going to enjoy her show as well. Obviously, if you guys follow me, I will be promoting it and sharing it in my story and stuff. So I want to make sure you guys know about it. But other than that, I appreciate you coming on. This was fun. Once again, long overdue. We got past the technical difficulties and we got it done. So it's always a good thing. And I'm glad, like, we finally got to connect. We finally got to talk properly. Like, we've DM'd and texted and whatnot. We met the one time, but now we finally got to have a good face-to-face conversation. It was cool, man. It was a good time. I hope you enjoyed it.
If I'm ever in Vancouver, you're ever here in Edmonton, we'll just do it in person.
Yeah, definitely. No, that'd be fun too.
Funny. And if you guys enjoyed our spiritual talk, let us know, because we can
we can do more of this if you guys want us to. We'll just create more content. We'll put more content out in the world.
Literally.
And honestly, it was a pleasure meeting Mike. It was nice to finally see Cash in the flesh. It was cool, even though it's still virtually, not fully in the flesh, but you get what I mean. And other than that, also, last question, and then we're going to really wrap this up. Are you really an Edmonton Oilers fan now? Is this like a thing?
Yeah, Mike, am I an Edmonton Oilers fan?
The biggest.
Yeah.
And I've worked with the Oilers so much when I was at Sportsnet, so I love the organization, and like a lot of the players that I interviewed, always, very friendly and very classy. But I'm a Toronto girl. I mean, I cheer for them, but I don't hate the Oilers. So like tonight when we watch the Oilers play, I'm not going to be rooting against them. I'm going to cheer for them. I think David is elite, it's always a pleasure. Pardon?
No, that's true. What you just said is true. He is elite.
Literally next level.
Mm-hmm. But I can't even judge. I'm from Vancouver. I have like a love-hate relationship with the Canucks. So on that note, 2011 kind of broke my heart. But other than that, I kind of stopped being a hockey fan for a little bit there.
Trust issues.
Real trust issues. I waited years for them to get rid of the Sundins before I gave them another chance. I'm like, can we just move on? But, other than that, that's another whole conversation that we don't have to do right now. If you guys are ever in Vancouver, if I remember out that way, it'd be fun to hang out, keep doing the thing. Guys, follow all of our stuff. I know if I don't wrap this up now, I'm going to keep rambling anyways. So keep doing the thing. Tune into all the casual conversations. Tune in the TWC show. Follow me on the Wrestling Classic on Instagram. The YouTube's the same thing. TWC Worldwide on Twitter. Buy my merch, support my articles at 1:37 p.m. And I think that's it. Ooh, yeah, dig it.
It's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.